Welcome back to the Microforge. I'm Albert, and on today's video, we're going to be building this centerpiece tower using the new Slice and Slot Desolate Dungeon pieces. Now, in our previous video, we built an entire tabletop's worth of terrain using the new Desolate Dungeon pieces, but this time around, I wanted to make sure that all of these pieces could go together in a way to build something a little bit more substantial, a centerpiece that stands out on the table. And I've got to say, I am super happy with how this has all come together. It has been a real pleasure building this big old tower. So let's get into it and see how it's done. To start with, I prep all of my foam. Now, for long-time viewers of the channel, you'll be familiar with this process. If you're new around here though, make sure you go and check out this video for some more details on the process that I use to prep my foam. Now we're ready to use one of our newer jigs, the 3060 corner cutter. It's pretty straightforward. All you have to do is slide in your 10mm thick foam, and that will enable you to then come along with your hot wire cutter and slice off at a perfect angle. This corner cutter enables you to cut perfect 60 and 120 degree angles, which essentially is the bones of all of the Slice and Slot Desolate Dungeon pieces. As we all know, evil terrain is always better when there's pointy angles. With the angle cut and the wall looking suitably ruined, I insert my extra small cutting jig, and I'm putting the medium jig in here just to give me an accurate offset from that corner so I can have an evenly spaced window on both sides of the tower. Then I can zip around with my hot wire cutter, cutting out that extra small jig. Even though I know this is going to fit, I still always like doing a test dry fit just to make sure that it's not snagging on anything. And also just testing to see how it's going to look overall, making sure I'm happy with the placement and the composition overall. Once I'm happy with that, I can then texture all of the foam. I always like to use a combination of scrunched up foil and a rock from the garden. These edges seemed a little bit too perfect for my liking, so I just used my craft knife to flick away some of the edges and round them off so that they feel a bit more ruined. Now that I'm happy with the texturing, I can glue in my window piece. For this, I like to use construction adhesive. This gives me the best balance of really strong long-term gluing, but also the flexibility as I'm gluing this together. There's about a 15 to 20 minute working time where I can position the piece exactly how I want it, and I can also clean up any of the glue drips relatively easy. Once I've assembled both walls, I can then glue them together, and I'm going to also put this beautiful rusted metal corner crenellation cap on top. This is specifically designed to work as a corner piece for a 60-degree angle, just like I've cut here for this tower. So this will help to keep those pieces aligned to that 60 degrees. I realized just as I put this on that I didn't actually apply any glue to the wall itself. And this is obviously the benefit of not using hot glue and using construction adhesive, because it's very easy to just take that off quickly and then glue it back together again. Job's a good one. To protect this very sharp edge, I also have some 3D printed 60-degree corner caps. So I go ahead and I glue those in place, and this will help to really protect that edge. Then I go in and I apply the rest of these beautiful rusty metal crenellations. If you're enjoying the build so far, make sure you go and check the project out over on Kickstarter. It's now live. We've got over 150 backers already on board. We're unlocking those stretch goals. And if evil terrain isn't your thing, don't worry. We've got the original set up there. You can add it onto your pledge and even grab a copy of those physical MDF jigs as well. Right, now that we've finished the top of the tower, it's time to give it a base. There are a few different options when it comes to 60-degree archways. I've got a large and an extra large to choose from, and I really want this tower to be imposing, so I think I've got to go for that extra large option. In order to cut a 60-degree archway, we need to use a new jig again. This one gives us the correct angle for these 60-degree archways. So the first thing is to come along and cut out the foam. Again, using a hot wire is going to be easier, but you can do this with a craft knife if you don't own a hot wire cutter. Then I always like to do a test fit, and you'll see here we need to miter this corner. So we need to put it back into our little angle cutter again here, because I want a 60-degree angle. I'm going to cut each piece at 30 degrees. Using the hot wire for this makes it an absolute breeze. And once I've got both sides cut out, I can then do a dry fit test. When I'm happy with that, it's just a case of cutting out that ruined brick pattern on the hot wire cutter, taking my time. This is sped up at about 500%, so no need to rush. I need to continue the angle of this archway all the way down, and this is pretty straightforward. Just taking a ruler, I mark out where I need to then come along with my hobby knife and cut that piece off. The piece I've cut is a little bit too big, and that's fine because everything is measured against these 5 or 10 mil increments. So I know exactly where I need to cut this piece down. Then it's just a case of giving it all a good solid texturing. Once I'm happy with my texture, I can come along and glue these pieces together using my hot glue gun. Now, the reason I'm using my hot glue gun here is that I want to cut a window into this section, and I know the window will go over this part where the two walls are joining. I can easily cut that on my hot wire cutter if I'm using hot glue. It becomes less easy if I use construction adhesive. So here you can see a really seamless join between those two pieces of wall and the window, tying it all together. Now all the pieces are ready to be assembled. I do one last dry fit just to make sure I'm absolutely happy with the fit of all of the pieces, and then I can come in with my construction adhesive and really glue this down so it's nice and strong and will stand the test of time on the gaming table. I probably should have waited a little bit longer for the glue to set up on this bottom half, but I was just too excited to assemble the whole thing. So I grabbed a coffee cup as my structural support and glued the top and the bottom half together. And at this point, I was really happy I used that extra large archway. That extra height really makes this feel like an imposing terrain piece. But I feel like the tower needed to be even bigger, so I cut out the foundation for this tower out of a big chunk of 75mm thick XPS foam. I cut it into a triangular shape because that is the theme of Slice and Slot Desolate Dungeons. It's all about equilateral triangles and those angular pieces which make everything feel more sinister. With the base geometry cut, I carved in all of the stonework for that foundation piece. Now it was time to add some upper floors to this tower. At first, I scratched my head on how I would accurately cut 60-degree angled floors. Then I realized I was being an idiot because literally every one of the MDF jigs has an inbuilt 60-degree angle on the arches. So I used this as the template, and these floors fit perfectly. Then I started thinking about this tower before it was ruined and how people would have gotten on to these upper levels. And of course, we needed some stairs. Now, I was lucky I had a whole bunch of stairs lying around from previous projects that I could just grab and use for this. But if you want a detailed tutorial on my approach to stair making, make sure you chuck it down in the comments below. To glue this in, I'm just using construction adhesive, and I've got some cocktail skewers that I'll also stick in there to really reinforce that connection. The last thing to go in are these crumble downstairs, and I really like how this starts to also alter part of that silhouette of the tower. I decided to put on a upper level, almost like a roof, out of this stonework again because I had another one of these triangles cut out. And this time I wasn't worried about having a stair going all the way up to this very upper level. I did want to have a stair coming up from the ground level though. And again, this would be essentially a stair to nowhere, but it tells the narrative of how this tower used to be an actual functioning building, and it implies how this tower would have looked before it became a tumbled down mess. With all the other pieces in place, I glue the tower onto its base and again use some of those cocktail skewers just to really reinforce that join whilst the glue cures and sets in place. Whilst I was in this headspace of imagining what this tower would have looked like before it became a tumble down ruin, I thought about whether I wanted the archway to actually be a door that would have been the main entrance to the tower, or maybe this could have been just a giant window that looked out over the valley below. I opted for that second option, and so I have these small balustrades which I decided to cut down and chip away to really sell that idea of this being a tumbled down ruin. This way I don't have to design a grand stair entrance. I can think about the entrance into this tower from a different angle, which hopefully means that the gameplay around the tower can be a little bit more dynamic in the long run as well. There are a few last greeblies that I want to add to give a little bit more depth to the piece. So a ruined upper balustrade, and I have these additional metal strap greeblies which just stick flat onto that foam and also help to tie in the aesthetic of all of this kind of tortured rusty metal all over this old ruined brickwork. I really like having just a few extra pieces to add a little bit of a flourish and embellish the stonework so it's not all just flat stonework. I got this idea that I wanted the tower to almost be jutting out of a rocky outcrop. I had these huge bits of pine bark. If you want to see my method of getting such large pine bark, make sure you pop it down in the comments below and I'll do a video on that at a later date. Here I'm just cutting up all the pieces so they sit nice and flush up against that foundation stonework. I really want to try and sell the idea of this tower almost emerging out of that rock. Once I'm happy with all of the stone positioning, I just come along with my construction adhesive and I glue those all down in place. Now I thought the back of the tower should actually be where you enter into this tower. So I've glued on one last rock here, and then I've got a separate set of stairs which lead up into that main tower area. With that all done, it's time to paint the tower. Now, if you want a detailed painting guide, make sure you go and check our previous video out where I detail exactly how I achieve all of the stonework look. The reason I'm painting it separately is that I really want to make sure I get this nice, spooky, glowing feel to it that I got on the rest of the terrain pieces, and I wasn't sure if I could do that if it was already glued into this very big, chunky base. I usually like to work methodically through building everything and then painting once, but if Zorp has taught me anything, it's that it's okay to just finish certain sections off at a time. So here I come back in and I glue that stair in, and I'll just try and match that paint work in the final phase. Now I'm just doing the landforming. So I glue down some foil in place, and that will make sure that I don't have to use quite as much of my sculptor mold. This is a homemade mix. If you want to know how to make a good homemade mix, go and check out my mate Adam over at 3D Games. He does a great tutorial and takes you through how to make some of this stuff yourself. This is a pretty straightforward process. I'm just trying to blend out between the rocks and all of the rubble area. Off camera, I went through and I stuck in a whole bunch of pre-cut XPS foam bricks, and then I slapped down a whole heap of PVA glue and started putting on all of my ground cover, starting with some of those bigger rocks and then blending it out with a nice mix of tile grout and dirt from the garden. With all of the ground cover dry, I come back in with my paintbrush and I paint in all of the crumbled masonry. And I also use this opportunity to paint all of these rocks. Here I'm using, I guess, an acrylic version of leopard spotting. So instead of just doing a grey base, I'm mixing grey paint in with green, and then it might seem a little bit crazy, but purple. That purple is actually going to contrast really nicely with the aqua teal spooky glow that I've got on the main tower. Now, it looks pretty intense now, but this will dry and dull right down. I just work my way around the whole model, base coating all of the areas that still need some paint. Not painting any of the ground cover because I'm happy to leave it that kind of desolate, barren, dark, grayish brown look that the ground cover has given me without any paint. Once I'm happy with all of the base coating, I come back in and I give everything a dry brush just to bring it up to look the same as the rest of the tower. I'm purposefully going to try and make the surrounding rocks feel a little bit darker, just so that there is, again, another point of contrast between the main building and the natural surroundings of the landscape. This painting process resulted in a bit of a hard line at the base of the tower, and I wanted to soften that and make it feel like it had a little bit more of that ethereal, spooky glow. So I came back in with a white ink and then my turquoise ink over the top to just blend that to give it a little bit more vibrancy and make it feel like the rest of the ground was glowing a little bit too. The last step is just to come back in with some grass tufts, and here I'm focusing on dead and bedraggled big thistle bushes. This is really selling it as a desolate dungeon. And with that, we're ready for the grand reveal. Thank you so much for sticking around to the end and watching all the way through. If you want to back the campaign, please do go and check out Slice and Slot Desolate Dungeons. It's still got a few more weeks left in the campaign. We've got loads of stretch goals to unlock. We would love to have you join us on our crafting journey. But until next we're together, have fun hobbying.